the recently installed Secretary General of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, the CTU. And he is expected to share his vision on the digital Caribbean. What is the digital Caribbean? What can we expect from this effective layer of regional ICT integration? What do we need to know? What roles can we play in this vision? S.G. Taylor, or Rodney, if I may, is no stranger to the CTU or Trinidad and Tobago. So let's get this conversation started. Rodney, thank you for being part of this evening's conversation. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be, talking to you guys in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm doing very well. Thank you, Kevon. Good to see you.
That is great to hear, Rodney. That's great to hear. And of course, you could probably tell us a bit more about your previous affiliation with the CTU. You're no stranger to Trinidad and Tobago. So tell us a bit more about your previous affiliation to ICT organizations and your familiarity with Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, let's start with Trinidad and Tobago. I consider it to be my second home. I love Trinidad and Tobago. I love the people, the culture, the food, the music, everything about it. So I actually studied there from I think it was 93 or so, thereabouts. Whatever year there was the coup. Sorry to bring back the memories of that coup, but I arrived in Trinidad that year, studied in Maracas Valley. At the time, it was Andrews University Extension Campus in Maracas Valley. I think it's now University of the Southern Caribbean. Spent 3 years there, fell in love with the whole culture of Trinidad and Tobago. Then I came back in 2010 to work with the CTU for 4 years as a business development and operations manager. And again, thoroughly enjoyed that work with the 20 member states of the CTU. Left the CTU, went back to foreign affairs because I spent a great part of my career as the manager of the information systems for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And that was a great stint as well, because all of the overseas embassies from Europe, in Asia, in North America, I was responsible for rolling out the IT strategy for all of those missions. So when I left the CTU, I went back to foreign affairs, but this time I actually got more into foreign policy, because it's good sometimes to have a sort of, diversified background. And for a short while, I headed the CARICOM and Caribbean Relations Desk. Then I moved from there to be the director of the data processing department, which then morphed into the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology. And I took the first post created for the Chief Digital Technology Officer. And that post is sort of the equivalent of the Chief Medical Officer, the Chief Agricultural Officer, but it is obviously very focused on technology. And it was a sort of a move by the government to place more emphasis on digital transformation and driving the overall digital economic transformation of Barbados. So, and of course, now here I am since March 1st as the Secretary General. Really honored and humbled to lead the great organization, which has been established since 1989. So following in the footsteps of Bernadette Lewis, who is now the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Telecoms Organization, maintain close contact with her as well. So very honored and pleased to be in this position, and will do my best to advance digital transformation throughout the Caribbean.
Rodney,
so that's the synopsis.
I think without a doubt we could call you a true ICT trailblazer. And a trailblazer, not only in the sense of just the technical stuff, you have that foreign affairs experience talk about as well. And the data processing unit, you have done it all, quote unquote. You know the different perspectives. That's wonderful to hear.
Thank you. Thank you. And it really is good to have those those different perspectives. My experience in foreign affairs, in diplomacy, in technology, and it bodes well, as you very well know. I know you wear many hats as well, representing LACNIC within the region. But really, when you get to the international and the regional arena, it really is about representation. And so diplomacy goes a long way. The ability to communicate, to bring together people to collaborate and advance issues, even around technology, is very important. So I'm really grateful for the experience I've had over the years.
Wow, wow, wow. And of course, you're here as the SG since March in a very opportune moment in the Caribbean in general, in terms of what we are doing with digital transformation and the entire concept of digital Caribbean. So, this digital Caribbean, can we demystify this a bit? Because, in my opinion, and this is probably a personal opinion, a lot of things digital seem to come from our imagery of social science fiction, I like to call it Hollywood, movies, books. But that said, art imitates life. So, what are some of the tangible expected outcomes of a digital Caribbean? How could we put this in simple words for the man on the street?
Well, listen, I'm a real true regionalist. I don't know if they get more regionalist than me. I really believe in this space that we live in called the Caribbean, and I really believe that we are stronger together if we work together. Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Antigua, St. Lucia. What really is the digital space, the single space, is a digital enablement of this CARICOM single market and economy. What it means really is harmonize policies, harmonize legislation. So laws, as we move from Barbados to Trinidad to Jamaica, if you're dealing with telecommunications, with information technology, the laws and the regulations are similar, they're the same, their standards are the same, the policies are the same. We promote a common interest. One of the key or prominent issues within that same single space is, for example, the elimination of roaming. If we're on one regional network, and we know the big players in the region, there's Digicel, there's Flow, everybody knows that. When I move from one country to the next within the region, there should be no concept of roaming because I'm in a single space. Yes, we're separated by water, but at the end of the day, we have a common history, we have a common legacy. Yes, the cultures may be different. I may get some doubles and I may get some bacon shark in Maracas Bay. Barbados, I may get some fish cakes and some, bakes. But in Jamaica, I may get festival and ackee and salt fish. But the reality is that we are really we have a common history. We have a common legacy. We're really one people. And if you go back to the days of the West Indian Federation, failed as it was, but really it is about bringing our people together. And technology can help us to do that in a real and practical and functional way. We talk about unity and so on, but we have to and allow people to move freely from one country to the next to work. We have to allow companies like Digicel and like Flow to be able to make their investments at a regional scale, because the markets individually are small. In Barbados, 300,000, Trinidad 1.3. In Montserrat, I think it's about 5,000 people now. So, but if we look at the market collectively, including Haiti, then we are substantial. We represent, if you look at the Americas region, for example, in the Organization of American States, the Caribbean is more than, is about 40-something% of the hemisphere in terms of individual sovereign states. So the point being that together, right, we can do a lot. Together, if we trade with each other, if we interact with each other, if we develop together, if we vote together in the international arena, then there's a lot that we can accomplish. And so the single ICT space is really an embodiment, a digital embodiment of the CARICOM single market and economy.
Great. So, like one of you mentioned there, you were talking about the harmonization of laws. And I think all those things add to just not only economies and efficiencies in the processes that we have moving from island to island. One of the things we fail to recognize at times is that we are really just a conglomeration of very small economies. So having that harmonization, having a level of predictability is actually a very good thing to attract foreign investment. And if we come to that as well, we probably have a greater say as to what we want that investment to look like. We can set the conditions for the big multinational actors if we operate as one voice.
100%. And I'll tell you what, so, I mean, you look at Facebook. Facebook is a multi-billion-dollar company, Google as well. You know, they see if we look at us individually, then we are very small markets to them. We have very little bargaining power. They don't even see the need to invest in cloud infrastructure within the region. But if we collectively say, listen, no, we understand that you're a big, you know, corporate, you know, global giant, but within the region, we want to ensure that there's infrastructure here around issues of sovereignty and issues of reliability and disaster recovery, then I think there's more impetus for Google and Facebook and the likes and the others who provide internet infrastructure to say, yes, let's make more investments in this infrastructure within the region, because this region has its own identity, has its own people, has its own imperatives and its own national priorities. So I think this is important collectively, and we cannot do it as individual countries.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now I'm picking up on some things you mentioned again. You spoke about the elimination of roaming as one of the things we can expect from a digital Caribbean. And this very point now of coming together to draw in the content delivery networks, your Facebook, your Akamai and such, and coming as a collective voice to make that sort of decision much more attractive for this region. You mentioned in passing the Caribbean single ICT space. Now, you and I, we are in ICT circles, we speak about this, but for the folks who haven't heard this really, what is the Caribbean, the CARICOM single ICT space in just like a sort of grassroots approach to what that means?
Yeah. So, like I said, it's like seeing information and communication technology regionally without any distinction as we move from one country to the other. So the elimination of borders from a technological perspective. A lot of the providers already have built regional networks because it makes sense. This like the subsea fiber cables that connect Barbados to Trinidad to Jamaica, it is one network. So why are we talking about roaming? Why are we being presented with large bills as we move from one country to the next to call our loved ones? Why are we trying to get onto free Wi-Fi to use over-the-top services like WhatsApp? This should be treated as one space, okay? Because we are really, like I said, if we're talking about a single market and economy, then it should be one single technological infrastructure. The digital identity issued to me by the government of Barbados should be accepted in Trinidad and Tobago. It should allow me to access financial services. The banks in Trinidad should accept it. They should be able to cross-reference with some regional infrastructure to authenticate who I am. And so they need to provide proof of address and 3 forms of identity, and all of these things should not matter. And as we move more and more towards a digital economy, then basically what we're talking about is the ability to move seamlessly from one country to the next, access digital services with common laws in relation to data protection, cybersecurity, telecommunications, you know, any ICT related legislation should be harmonized across the region. Spectrum management, there should be one standard. We talk about 5G, for example, there should be a common policy, common standards as I move my phone. And we take these things for granted, but even the ability to take my mobile phone and use it in another territory within the region and not have issues because of frequency allocations or because of cross-border interference or because there's different regulations on the spectrum, you know, these things are what we're trying to eliminate and harmonize across the CARICOM space.
Okay, Kevin, there's a question from Spencer Thomas. Hi, Spence. What will characterize the Rodney's first period year or so as head of the CTU?
Great question, Rod. Spence.
Yeah. So what is I think one of the first interviews I did, they asked me what I would do in the first 30 days or first 100 days or something of that sort. The good thing is that I worked with the C2 before for 4 years, so I have a very good understanding of what it does, its role, and so on. And I think maybe that's why I got the job. But I recognize the need to restructure the organization to create a new structure that would help it to serve the needs of its 20 member states. And if we have, you can imagine that we have 20 countries that we serve. Each of them have their own national imperatives The ministers of these countries form the General Conference of the CTU, and we also have an Executive Council, which is the Chief Technical Advisors. So having come back to the CTU now in this capacity, I am looking at and we've had a management retreat where we're looking at the restructuring of the organization to create, units that would allow us to serve our mandate more effectively. So even things like stakeholder engagement, for example, our ability to constantly maintain contact with our members so they don't think that the CTU is some organization out there in Trinidad and Tobago that is of little importance to what I'm doing. The availability of opportunities for training and capacity building. And very recently we offered, for example, working with Diplo Foundation, scholarships on cybersecurity diplomacy, for example. And these are things that we need to be constantly doing, offering opportunities, working with stakeholders to build capacity, whether it's CARIBNOG, Diplo Foundation, LATNIC, ARIN, ICANN, and what have you. We need to constantly manage that relationship. Even, for example, with the World Telecoms Development Conference, which is coming up, it is scheduled for November in Ethiopia. I doubt that it will actually, be executed as planned because of the COVID pandemic. It may be pushed back to 2022, or it may be held virtually. But even for that conference, what we did, since joining the CTU, I brought together our member states. We had very good representation. 14 member states joined in a regional preparatory meeting to say, listen, we can't just go into the WTDC and not have some concurrence at the regional level to say, okay, these are our priorities and this is what we want to advocate when we get to the WTC, when we get within the ITU. These are the priorities of the region. And so we speak with one collective voice. We had the opportunity, member states came together virtually, we had the chief technical advisors, and we came up with a number of priorities which we then put forward at the level of the Americas, working with organizations like CTEL, right, in the Organization of American States, to say, look, these are the priorities for the region: disaster and emergency communications, et cetera, et cetera. So priority, restructure the organization to make sure that we are fit for purpose, ensure that we have the good value proposition, we can attract private sector membership, we can ensure that our member states at the country level understand the value of the CTU and are willing to pay diligently their contributions so we can function. But also to ensure that the CTU is representing the interests of the members within the International Telecommunications Union, within Internet Corporation for Sign Names and Numbers, within LATNIC, within ARIN, and so on. So we're able to consolidate the position of the region, represent, and be able to advise. Also, and more importantly, the ability to support at the national level the implementation of ICT projects. So I'm pushing for the establishment of a business development and innovation unit that would do the hand-holding, that would work when we agree on policies. So policy is fine, but when we talk about actual implementation, the ability to work with a network of ICT practitioners to support implementation of projects in Jamaica, in Bahamas, in St. Lucia, in Grenada, and wherever else, so that we're not just talking about policy, but we actually have supporting our member states in the implementation of ICT projects and real tangible projects.
So another question from Christian Apu, but you've been talking about your members and your member states and the organizations that are members, but would you be working on engaging other stakeholders? For example, will you extend to multi-stakeholder groups to work with them, especially with regard to implementation and so forth? I changed his words a little bit and added a bit of mine, but that's basically the question.
Well, yeah, at the management retreat, we looked at the whole issue of who are our stakeholders. And of course, our member states are stakeholders because they form the CTU, our sovereign governments, Barbados, Jamaica, and so on. They're major stakeholders, but we also have private sector members, the likes of Digicel, the likes of Flow, who are operating, who are employing people within the region. They're making investments in telecommunications infrastructure. Cloud Carib, for example, is a member of Viasat that provides satellite communications. All of these help in the development of the sector. So these are stakeholders that we represent and we want to bring on board as members. But we also have non-state actors. We also have what we call civil society members. We have organizations that may represent the disabled community, people with disabilities, that may represent young people and youth issues. And so we see them as stakeholders, and we need to find the mechanisms through which we can engage them. And we do have civil society membership, and it is a very nominal fee to be a part of the CTU. But also, we provide opportunities to engage with them through forums like the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum, for example, and that is something that evolve outside. What should I call it? The tentacles of the CTU, so that it is really truly multi-stakeholder in nature. That we'd work with the other stakeholders, especially what I'd love to see is non-ICT practitioners involved in internet governance. So I don't need to be an ICT professional to have a discussion about the internet and how it is impacting my children and their mental health, how it is being portrayed to women and people, whoever. There are different stakeholders, and I think we need to bring them into the discussion. And if we're having an internet governance discussion and it's only IT practitioners, then we are failing in our job. So we have to ensure that there's broad multi-stakeholder consultation when we're talking about the internet and the future development of the internet. And you'll see this a lot in a lot of the developed countries. They're very, the nuanced stakeholder groups that come and represent their positions. And I would love to see that in the Caribbean.
Wonderful. So Rodney, I like what you're saying there. We're expecting to see a CTU that convenes and is involved in spaces not only with the ICT professionals. You can see CTU in CTU spaces, trade professionals, creatives, and I think right now, given this P word that we don't want to harp too much on, creatives are being particularly affected by all of this, and the CTU will be a lot more hearing these different inputs and being like the aggregate facilitator of all these things to come to the digital space per se.
Yeah, I mean, we're just one of the stakeholders. We don't own the space. We are just a stakeholder representing government policies, representing private sector policies, but there are also other stakeholders in the space. So we want to work collaboratively to ensure that all the stakeholders are represented within the international arena, and that we develop policies and we move forward in the interest of all of our different stakeholder groups.
We have a follow-up question from Spencer now. He asks, and I guess this is more about your strategies. How do you plan to get the youths of the region on board, the youth factor? How do you bring them in the fold? And I think one of the things...
Hi, Spencer.
Yeah, the capacity building, which is a component, but really getting youths in as being part of the space. What are your plans?
Yeah. So for the CIGF this year, we're starting with we're going to have a youth forum.
Okay.
CIGF Youth Forum, and I actually, and I'm happy to be talking to the Internet, Trinidad and Tobago Internet Society chapter, the Internet Society Trinidad and Tobago chapter, because I served as the chair of the Barbados Internet Society Barbados chapter, and we always started our Internet Governance Forum with a youth forum. And even the planning of that forum is that we planned it and said it's a youth forum, so come and join. We had young people from the community colleges, from the University of West Indies, planning as part of the planning process. And we talked about gaming and social media and all those things that are of interest to the youth. And so that is one, tangible thing that we implement, that we will want to see a youth internet governance forum at the regional level. But also, when I worked with the government of Barbados, with the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology, we implemented a digital ambassadors program. And I would love to be able to see that at the regional level, that we have digital ambassadors. So within every country, there are young people who understand the technology, who, as we call them, digital natives. It's not like me. I'm over 50 now, right? So when I was born, the internet wasn't really there, but they're born into it, and so it's second nature to them. They will have different perspectives on it. And so we want to be able to enlist these digital ambassadors at the regional level to be able to bring their perspectives and give their views on where we should be moving forward in the future. So we're looking to create that space with the youth digital ambassadors, but also within the Internet Governance Forum to have that youth forum as well that will kick off the Internet Governance Forum at the regional level.
Wonderful. And you are getting recognition for that idea. Christian Apu says is an excellent forum for ongoing engagement.
Thank you.
Great. And now we have Rudy Daniel. Rudy, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Rudy.
Rudy, unmute yourself.
I know mute and unmute has been one of the biggest challenges of this virtual life we've been living in. Rudy, is everything okay? Rudy, if you have problems with your audio, just send us a sign in the chat so we'll know. Okay. All right. So Spencer says the unmute function isn't working.
No,
right.
I enabled. If you stick your hand up,
maybe you could
can
try to unmute.
Unmute yourself.
Right. Okay, so while we wait on Rudy's intervention, I'm wondering if we could probably address Jason here. Jason has a long one, so let me see if I can read it quickly. And of course, you can see it too, but for the folks who are not seeing the chat and who will be looking at this recording, for post-COVID revival of the Caribbean, for true creation of a digital CARICOM space, we need to use state assets like community centers and university facilities, public and private partnerships, digital ICT skills training facilitator, incubators, trainer. Under United Nations 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 8, good jobs and economic growth, SDG 9, industry innovation, SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. Programs structured to be offered to 17+ million citizens in the region, specifically for retooling, training of thousands of retrenched telecom professionals for the workforce and future expansion of the human resource services into Caribbean or CARICOM, LATAM, and the African continent. There must be a push for services to other continents like Africa. And that is really a good catchment of things there. One of the things that I wanted to throw in there before you react, Rodney, is what are the possibilities or potential for Caribbean citizens right now to engage in these future of work ideas? I mean, teleworking at the time was highly debated whether you're productive or not. Considering what Jason had just commented about how we situate digital, tell us a bit more about those opportunities with digital and work and productive use.
Okay, so I'm glad you raised that, and I'm glad that you've gone there, right? If you had all the money in the world, if you could choose to live anywhere in the world, where would you choose to live? Okay, you would choose to live as many of the billionaires and the millionaires do choose to live in the Caribbean. Okay, yes, you would fly back to New York, enjoy a good play on Broadway. You'd fly to London occasionally. You'd fly to Paris. But where would you live? And certainly you would live within the region in the winter season, right? At the very least, you'd live here in the winter season. Who wants to be, wearing winter coats and all of that? Beautiful weather, beautiful food, wonderful people. So this whole idea of teleworking, of remote working, makes the region much more attractive. And in fact, the government of Barbados, very soon after the pandemic broke, offered the, I don't remember the exact name of the program, but it basically offered the ability to work within Barbados on a visa, right? A welcome stamp. It was called the Welcome Stamp program. And you don't even actually need to pay taxes within Barbados. You earn your salary, if you're working with Facebook or Google, you get your money paid to your bank account. But okay, you're not paying income tax. But what happens is that you're renting a property, you're paying real estate, you're renting a car, you're buying food, and you're driving economic activity. We are lecturers in Barbados lecturing in American universities from Barbados. You know, and many of the other countries in the region, Antigua and Barbuda and others, have done it. And so it is a new opportunity for us to market ourselves to the world. But we also, if that is the case, we need to ensure that the infrastructure is sound. Okay, that the internet infrastructure is reliable, there is good access, it's affordable, it is secure, and all the other services are available, whether it's banking, whether it's fine restaurants and whatever else, so that it is attractive to the world. And there's been a significant uptake. There are some very, very senior executives. If we talk about some of the companies I've mentioned, I've met them myself personally. I've been on calls with them where they have come to the region as a result of this opportunity, and they want to stay. They want to make investments. They want to make the Barbados and the region their base. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity for us. Very often, because we were born here, we don't recognize what we have. But the truth is, we live in a very beautiful region. And if we can get, from a technological perspective, the access to public services, for example, registering a business or renewing my driver's license, if we can move that and make it more convenient, ride-sharing applications. That's one of the questions, for example, that we got when we launched the remote working program. Right. It's like, do we have access to ride-sharing applications like Uber? You know, is there access to things like Airbnb and the others? Is it available here, and what's not? So we have to ensure that the technological infrastructure is there to support these programs. And I think that once we get that right, this region will be, to be honest, the most attractive place to work in the world.
And I like how you gave that example of Prime Minister Mia Mottley's initiative for digital nomads. I remember seeing some criticism about it. It would have seemed as if it was only geared towards the foreigners coming here. And my question, and it ties into the question we have here from Kathleen, are we digital nomads in ourselves? If we look, besides the infrastructure issue.
I don't want to disrupt you too much, but Rudy still has his hand up, huh? Just reminding you.
Sure.
Rudy's still working.
Is Rudy's audio working? That's the hold up here. Is his audio working?
Yeah, he had unmuted. And
okay, all right. So, okay.
All right. I think we can. I think we're hearing Rudy now. Go ahead, Rudy.
Okay, Rudy, go on.
Good evening, and good evening, Mr. Taylor. Lovely to see you.
Good evening. Thank you.
My chat has been disabled, so I had no idea that I had my hand up.
Okay.
And I didn't put my hand up, so I don't know what's going on. Anyway, however,
well, you have the floor now.
I have the floor. I was listening to you earlier when you were talking about who your stakeholders were. And so when I listened to it, it seemed to me that you were speaking from an industry viewpoint as opposed to what I call a kind of sovereignty viewpoint. So I just wanted you to comment on the fact that I have a view of one of the most important stakeholders, those people who are at the center of the internet, who are the users. And how are we to address that from the concept, your earlier concept of a one space CARICOM with all the people who are in so many different modes of being. So that's the question I just formulated just now. But so
yeah.
From that, I just wanted to ask you about, I mean, I have been known to express negative views about a one space CARICOM. But recently, I have a very positive view about a one space CARICOM because space equals put a satellite up there and let us enable the whole infrastructure of the region, and let's get all the governments to pay for it, and let's go down the road, because that is going to be the hub from which we can change everything else around it, including how the incumbents interact with all the governments. So I'll just stop right there. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Sure, and thank you for your question. I'll tell you, the users, we consider the users, the internet users, to be obviously a part of our stakeholders, but as part of the civil society, So governments are very clear who governments are. You have ministers, you have prime ministers, presidents, you have chief technical advisors, very clear distinction. They're the ones that form the CTU, so they're definitely our key stakeholders. You also have the private sector, the companies that have invested in telecommunications infrastructure. They're important because they're making the investments that create jobs, that drive economic activity. But you also have civil society. You have different interest groups, like I mentioned. They may represent different perspectives, people with disabilities. They may represent women. They may represent youth, and all kinds of different, different stakeholders. But what we group them under civil society. At the end of the day, everything we really do at the government level, at the business level, should benefit our citizens. All right, it should be citizen-centric, because those are the ones that we're creating jobs for, we're developing policies for, we're creating economic opportunities for. And if we're not serving them, if it's not in their interest, then we're not developing policies effectively, and we're not, all the investment in the world will not create the kind of societies that we want. And so that civil society group is a very important group, because it gets down, as I say, to brass tacks, to not just representing the narrow interests of politicians or governments or private investment, but you're dealing with citizens and their needs and their unique requirements and so on. And we have to ensure that we're fulfilling them. So we do have that category of membership. A lot of our sessions are open to private citizens. We have people who religiously, I could mention Deirdre Williams, for example, in Solution. Others that are consistently there, not because they're IT experts, but because they have a view as a user of the internet. And they're saying, well, this is my perspective. Okay, this is my perspective, and it is very different from a private company that is making investment. It's very different from a government that's setting policy. This is my perspective. And that perspective is very important in order to guide us in developing policy, to guide us in attracting private sector investment. So we definitely understand the value of that stakeholder group called the citizen.
Rodney, thanks for raising that about the citizen perspective. I think that is very, very useful and needed. And I see we are getting a lot more questions in the chat. So let me get back to one earlier from Kathleen. When I was going to introduce Kathleen's comment and question, we were speaking about the digital nomad initiatives. And I wanted to ask, aside from connectivity infrastructure issues, what are your views on us as Caribbean people being these sort of digital nomads already? What advantages we have? What are your views on that level of what you would call the formal curriculum and learning opportunities versus informal? And Kathleen wanted to specifically ask about how do we get more apps and content developed from our region that can derive income?
Well, there are a lot of Caribbean nationals working for these Fortune 500 companies, working for the tech companies like Facebook. I know in particular there's a Trinidadian, I believe, who's working for Facebook, and I mean a very senior level chief legal advisor or something of the sort. Caribbean nationals working for Google. So we have the talent, but very often the talent leaves the region because in search of opportunities. But if we're saying we're pushing for digital nomads, then there's no reason for the talent to leave the region. We can stay here. We can create that innovative space for our developers. And I have seen personally, groups of developers who are second to none, really. And we really need to just create that culture of innovation within the region, so that again, there isn't this romanticizing of Silicon Valley as a place where the only place where innovation exists. because it can exist here if we nurture our young talent and we create a culture of innovation, and we start to focus on using indigenous solutions. For example, within COVID, we had a solution developed right here in Barbados that managed all of the COVID appointments, the vaccinations, the results, all of that developed right here by a developer who was in the healthcare sector. And so I think he was a radiologist or something like that, but he also had a love for programming. And so because he understood the sector very well, because he was a practitioner in the sector, he was able to work himself and some other developers to develop a solution, a homegrown solution, that managed the appointment system, that managed the testing, that managed the return of results, and it made a huge and significant difference. So the web-based application, accessible to all of the polyclinics across the country, all the doctors, all the private testers, and so on. And that made a significant difference. And it is something that I believe, just as the US government supports private enterprises within the US, that we should push these solutions regionally. We should nurture them. We should roll them out at the regional level and say, hey, St. Lucia, hey, Grenada, this is a solution that we developed here in Barbados, and it works. And it doesn't cost $5 or $10 or $15 million. It costs maybe $500,000. Maybe it costs $250,000. But the point is, we are supporting, nurturing, and developing, rolling out solutions at the digital level, at the regional level, and perhaps at the international level as well, because the code is code. You know, this is the American code and this is the British code. It's code. If it's good code, it will find its way to the international market. So I think we just really need to create that culture of innovation.
And Rodney, on that point there, when you gave the example of the appointment system being rolled out, are these things just what you call solutions in the moment because of these pivot strategies that we are all doing because of the pandemic? Or do you see them as more long-term shifts that we will see in our culture going towards more digital entrepreneurship?
Long-term shifts.
And I want to raise a question from Dr. Adrian Daisley, who asks, what are some of the challenges you foresee post-COVID-19? So I don't like to talk about challenges without throwing the flip side of that and talk about opportunities. So post-COVID-19, the recovery, when we're no longer scrambling to work within these parameters, what do you foresee happening in this digital space post-COVID-19?
Right. So the challenges around COVID, obviously, is the decline in economic growth and development. Loss of jobs, tourists not coming anymore, you know, significant decline. A lot of economies are dependent on tourism. That has taken a significant hit. So there are a lot of people unemployed within the region. I mean, there are a lot of people who have lost economic opportunities, people who are running bars and restaurants who've lost money, who are laid off people. Those are the challenges associated with the global pandemic, right? The loss of economic activity. Where is the opportunity? The opportunity now, therefore, is one, we talked about the move towards making the region the mecca for digital nomads, right? Because of all of the wonderful things that we have to offer, but also the opportunity for governments now to transition the delivery of public services in a digital environment. And so in the case of Barbados, we move expeditiously towards the same appointment system for clinics. I mean, I remember distinctly years back when I went to a clinic to get a vaccination for my son, that they pulled up a blue book from an counter and they flipped through the pages and went back, you know, to find when his first vaccination was. Now, can you imagine trying to manage a vaccination program nationally and having to deal with a book, you know, with pages and flipping through? It is madness. So this is a game changer. It will transform public health. It will transform the delivery of public health services. It will transform a number of other areas. And I think we will not go back to business as usual because it has caused us to leap forward in terms of digital transformation in the health sector and many other sectors in a way that I don't think we will go back. It is really a sort of inflection point now for the region.
Wonderful. And Speaking about now, I don't like to harp on the pandemic, but it is our reality at the moment. I remember in another forum you were speaking about the upsurge in internet usage also introduces us to a rise in our exposure to cyber risks. And Chris Chinapu asked the question along those lines. He says, yes, how will the users be engaged in ongoing governance? So I guess that relates to an earlier topic we were talking about, engaging youth and the citizen-centric focus. And then he asks, on the issues of privacy and cybersecurity, what are we doing to strengthen privacy and data protection? How do we propose to strengthen standards and regulatory frameworks, which are now part of the critical infrastructure in the digital space? I think it's a very timely point to talk about the cyber security, privacy issues that are attendant to this increase or this surge we have in internet usage and digital transformation on a whole.
Very, very pertinent, very relevant, very good question. We cannot seriously talk about digital transformation. We cannot talk about internet governance without touching on the issue of cybersecurity, cybercrime. That has the ability to, take us forward or to take us back. And we saw very recently, even with the United States, with all of its resources and technical expertise, the shutting down of a gas pipeline that had, very significant impact on the economy. So it is important that we focus on the issue of cybersecurity, and CARICOM impacts the Agency for Crime and Security has as part of its mandate to focus on cybersecurity, but CTU, having a mandate for technology, also has to pay attention to this issue and support our member states in the development of things like national cybersecurity strategies. It is very, very important to develop at the national level a national cybersecurity policy and strategies, to develop legislation that makes cybercrime illegal, as basic as that. Because if it is not illegal, then people will get away with all kinds of things. We will be soft targets. So the development of legislation around cybersecurity is important. There's a suite of legislation related to information technology, cybersecurity, cybercrime has to be a part of it. But in addition to that, awareness campaigns, so that people are aware at a very basic level, the do's and don'ts as we traverse the internet. You get an email from someone who says, click here, follow this or do that. Basic things. I'm the bank, what have you, give me your account number. These things are very, very important because a lot of cybercrime is centered around social engineering, the ability to trick people, the ability people who see an email and believe it is genuine and what's not. So awareness building, education, but also developing our capabilities in terms of responding where there are attacks on our critical infrastructure like telecommunications, like the electricity grid, the power grid, like our water systems, because as you move more and more towards the internet and smart grids and smart utilities, then there is the potential for disruption. And really, cybersecurity is a national security issue. And I think our governments need to elevate it to the level where if there's a National Security Council, that cybersecurity has to be a part of the discussion at that level. The minister responsible for national security has to be briefed on threats to the infrastructure, ICT infrastructure. It has to, there has to be a connection, like I said. So the CTU will work with our member states to develop national cybersecurity strategies. We've had great support from the Organization of the American States. We've had great support from the International Telecommunications Union. We need to do that, develop a national strategy, develop cybersecurity incident response mechanisms. So again, if we're under attack, we're not scrambling, trying to find out what to do, but there is a national response mechanism that would allow us to get back on our feet.
And of course, as you've mentioned, well, I'm just paraphrasing and deducing from what you were saying, a cybersecurity strategy is only as strong as its weakest link. So going back to the question of awareness building, again, these have to be more user or citizen-centric activities. And I think the onus isn't just on the CTU, but for other groups like ourselves, Internet Society, Trinidad Tobago chapter, academic groups and the like, to really join in the fray, and probably with the CTU being the hub or the enabler, we could collaborate on this front to really get this message out. One of the things I would like to personally see is active involvement of the media, not just to catch what is the media sensational type activities, but just building general awareness and understanding of particular concepts that will be required for us to operate safely within cyberspace. Now,
sorry, one second, just hold, so don't lose that thought, but I didn't touch on the issue of data protection, which is equally important. It is related to cybersecurity because integrity of data is important, and the availability, and so on is important. But a lot of countries are moving towards data protection legislation. Case of Barbados has done so. It is looking to establish the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, and we're seeing the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, and the ET from the EU as sort of the gold standard for data protection. But that is important for citizens to understand, that we respect the integrity of your personal data, your privacy, and so on, and it goes hand in hand with cybersecurity. So I just wanted to add that.
Wonderful, wonderful. You know, we have a saying here, it's something that the party knows that. So I just like to just give everyone a general heads up that we are into the last 10 minutes of this session.
Right.
And we have a number of comments still to address. So I would like us to start we will probably address or group some of these comments and going forward. Jackie, I see you have.
Yeah, I was basically gonna wonder if Rodney is willing to stay for an extra 10 minutes so we could actually
all right.
through some of these questions.
It's okay.
I mean,
That's fine.
Virtual dinner and cocktail
so
reception.
we kind of cut off questions in like the next minute or so, and then you'll have time, if you stay for another 10, to get through all the questions that have been asked.
Sure.
So if you have a question, put it in now, because after that, I'll make a line and we're not answering anymore. Sorry. You've had a lot of questions. It's wonderful. The conversation is flowing.
Yeah, it's been great. This is very good. Yeah.
Thanks.
So with that in mind, and I know we have a couple of things that were addressed beforehand. So Farid had asked about cybersecurity training, and I know Jackie responded on the Internet Society's training for members on cybersecurity, especially in terms of routing security, manners, encryption. At the start of the conversation, Rodney had spoken about the partnership with the Diplo Foundation for training in cybersecurity diplomacy, which gives you a good understanding of the distinct and the disparate components and how to navigate that field. I want to address this question from Dr. Adrian Daisley. I think we addressed this a bit earlier, the digital transformation and its impact on the ease of doing business in the region. So we somewhat addressed that. There is a second part of this question, though, which I think is relevant. What are the long-term effects of the digital transformation on the youth and their psychological health? And I guess probably not only youth, but I guess all of us, the effects of digital transformation on our health. We could probably take that one, and then I'll look to group some others while you address that.
Yeah, so we are social creatures. So even the whole concept of social or physical distancing has had an impact on our mental health, and you hear it almost every day, the impact of the pandemic, isolation on people's mental health. And I have a son who is 11 going on 12, who's had to be at home studying, and you can see that there is the need for that social interaction. And so when we talk about digital and online and so on, we still have to understand that we are social creatures. There's need for social interaction, for social, especially at the younger age, the ability to interact with people, the social skills that are developed from talking to people, and so on, which I think it is sort of the downside to this whole digital environment. And even if you talk about conferences and meetings and so on, Zoom is great, but wouldn't we rather be at a hotel somewhere, sitting, or at a beachfront property, having a glass of wine and chatting? This is the nature of who we are as human beings. So I don't think that the digital environment will replace the need for that social interaction, whether it's education or conferences, meetings, what have you, it will supplement and it will change the way that we do business going forward. But we always have to be cognizant that we are human beings and there's that need for social interaction. And maybe the technology will find ways of addressing that, but I don't think it will totally solve that.
Right. Rodney, while we were chatting and while we were giving these lovely explanations of the different concepts, there was an ongoing discussion in the chat where we identified the Trinidad and Tobago national working at Facebook. Her name is Maxine Williams. She's the Chief Diversity Officer and an acquaintance of our own Jackie. And Jackie is putting forward the idea that maybe it would be good to develop somewhere a repository of all the Caribbean nationals that we have across the globe who are working on digital issues, whether they're in Silicon Valley, whether in the major platforms. And it'd be good to tap into these folks from time to time. In terms of Maxine Williams, I'm not sure how many people are aware, but she was a guest to either the first or the second Girls in ICT Forum in Trinidad and Tobago in 2014. And that left a huge impression on the girls who attended there because they wanted to find out, me doing CXE, how do I get to that position of leadership? And what can you do to mentor me or to give me advice to get to those positions? And I think more of those exchanges across the board are actually very much needed. There is a lot of
people are quite willing. Jamaica in particular has a very strong diaspora interaction, and they have created things like internships at their companies in Silicon Valley. Hundreds of Jamaican students have gone on internships from the diaspora, setting this up in the companies that they work in. And if we can expand that to the entire Caribbean, it would be a really valuable resource. And a lot of them, they want to help. They just don't know who to talk to, or we need to go out there and access them.
And it's not just in tech too. So, and it's not just in tech. We have, we have nationals from the Caribbean that are, they go all the way up to vice president, of the United States. So we have connections globally, not just in technology. And I think we do need to leverage that network and have that database of persons that we can call on to help, to inspire, to mentor, our young people within the region.
Right. And ICT isn't, as you're saying, Rodney, ICT isn't a standalone issue. Let's not just think about tech. I'm not sure many people are aware, a few years ago within the World Bank, they created a drive to hire as many Caribbean professionals as possible. Interestingly, the head of the HR at that time was a Caribbean national, and you had other Caribbean nationals, but they were few in number. We can't talk tech without addressing development. And when it comes to the development and the financing agencies, who better to advise on these things than the Caribbean nationals, where the actual development and the agencies will be working. So it will be really useful to see this en masse, or a centralized point. I don't like to speak about centralized anything, but at least I have a point of reference where we can see these different components come together.
Yeah.
All right. And so, sorry.
I just mentioned something that I heard earlier.
Yes, Rudy.
Well, I thought that the digital nomad policies were quite nice, but I wondered whether or not we couldn't have done better than that and had exchanges. So, I mean, just because they'll have to come to the Caribbean and do their stuff in the nice sunshine so too, a lot of our people would like to perhaps set up a business somewhere else where they have a different kind of infrastructure, for example. So I thought that, we could well have done an exchange deal there. That would work.
Right.
Well, sorry, Rudy, I'm not like 100% sure where you're going. The truth is, the whole issue of a brain drain has been an issue for many years in the region. So we have had many of our nationals who excel in particular areas, look for opportunities in the developed countries because they pay more. There's more opportunities, there's bigger markets and so on. So we've always had that migration to the developed countries from the region. We're saying you can offer your services, you can offer your skills to the world, and you can do it from here. You know, you don't need to leave to find economic opportunities. The world is your market. You can offer Facebook, you can offer Google, you can offer Tesla, your services from right here in the region because you have the skills. We also have the infrastructure. There's the opportunity now, if we're talking about remote working, to offer it from right here. So not just bringing those persons here to work because it's such a wonderful place to live and to work, and it's safe, and the climate is wonderful. But we're saying here, our nationals can also offer our skills to the world from here without having to pick up and leave and get a green card or, you know, to get a visa and what's not, because you can offer it from here. We have the infrastructure to do so.
And I think, deducing from what both you and Rodney just mentioned, there is somewhat of an institutional weakness that we have to address to make sure that folks here can recognize these opportunities and they can exert or express or exercise their skills from this very point. And it's along those lines that Christian Apu had made this comment. He says the UE5 Island campus is seeking to facilitate and act as a catalyst for making island states the Silicon Valley of the Caribbean. Dr. Courtney Charles, who is also a previous director of Microsoft, is leading the initiative. How can the CTU utilize its convening role to support harmonization and acceleration of that Silicon vision? So it looks at this question, but institutionally, working with the universities, helping spur that Silicon Valley, that where probably it will involve exchanges of a sort to facilitate transfer technology and transfer knowledge, but at the end of the day, we strengthen our institutions and we work from here. Rodney, your comments on that?
Yeah. Well, I talked about the restructuring of the CTU, and one of the things that we need to start focusing on is innovation and supporting national innovation initiatives, but also at the regional level. Like I said, if there's a solution that was developed in Barbados, a local developer that works well for COVID, the management of vaccines, why don't we roll that out regionally? That's innovation. It can help to drive, you know, employment and so on. And in relation to university, you cannot really talk about innovation without the involvement of universities and academia, right? Even in the United States, the universities of any merit are the ones that are helping to drive research and innovation. So we have to leverage University of the West Indies and other institutions, tertiary institutions, to develop a vibrant innovation ecosystem within the region. So academia is important, private investment is important, developers are important, and so there's a whole range of stakeholders. So I'm fully on board with that. In Barbados's case, we've sought to develop a tech accelerator, including University of the West Indies, Cathedral Campus, others. But it is a whole ecosystem. It has to include universities, and like I said, we have to then sort of nurture our homegrown solutions and support them and roll them out at a regional and international level.
Wonderful. I think, Jackie, is there anything there that I may have missed along within the chat?
There was one question about CTU support of the community networks projects in the Caribbean that ISOC's been running. Shunan would know a lot more about which projects are currently ongoing, but given that we are going digital, we're transforming digitally and going to a digital Caribbean, there are a lot of places that still do not have accessibility, and community networks do fill that void to an extent. And how do those fit into the CTU's overall plan?
Well, we do need information on, we talked about the World Telecoms Development Conference I talked about, is the theme is connecting the unconnected, and they're still, don't recall the exact figure, but there's still quite a few billion people globally that are not connected to the internet in any real meaningful way. And obviously some of those that are in the region, we need to know exactly who they are, what number that represents within the region, whether it's Belize, Jamaica, Barbados, what have you. And it could be that, okay, there's fiber connectivity, but there's are not connected because it's an issue of affordability, of course. And so we need to have research, we need to have data on those unconnected people, and we need to develop strategies to get them connected, whether it's through universal service funds, through subsidies, through whatever means, to the provision of satellite services, what have you. So we have to ensure that those people can. So, and also in relation to the Internet Society, CTU has worked very closely with the Internet Society, with Shernan, OSEPA, and so on. In fact, one of the last real meaningful studies about connectivity in the region was done in 2017 by the Internet Society, right? And unleashing the internet in the Caribbean. And I referenced it at the last presentation I did because it was an excellent piece of work. And I think that's something that needs to be done on an ongoing basis to be able to understand the connectivity issues within the region, whether it's a cost, affordability issue, whether it is a connectivity issue, infrastructure issue, and so we can develop policies to help bring those who are on the wrong side of the digital divide onto the the right side and give them access to economic opportunities.
Great. So Jackie, how are we for time? Are we up about the last 5 minutes or so?
Well, according to me, we are the last 2 minutes.
The last 2 minutes. Okay.
That, yes.
So with that in mind, I want to see if we could probably wrap up right now with this last question I had. It would seem that we have touched on so many relevant things. Are we going to be overwhelmed? So Rodney, with a restructured CTU in mind, what in terms of a parting address, what would you say are the top 3 building blocks, the next top 3 things that we could all rally around and coalesce as a community to work on for this digital Caribbean? The top 3 things.
Well, yeah, a restructured CTU is important for sure, but even with the most efficient, well-structured organization, the CTU cannot do it alone. So we will definitely work with partners like LACNIC that you represent, like ARIN, like ICANN, like the Internet Societies, the chapters throughout the region, working at the grassroots level to bring the communities on board. And so we have to build that network and understand that we have a collective responsibility. And so, yes, the restructuring of the CTU will help us to do that, because I spoke about the creation of a stakeholder engagement unit that will specifically look at all of the players within this sector and bring us together.
Issue areas by chance?
Say again?
Issue areas that we can collectively work on? Issue areas,
yeah, so
connectivity and such, but yeah, like more specifically, yeah.
So infrastructure development of resilient infrastructure in particular, because we are prone to hurricanes and natural disasters, to build that infrastructure that allows us to maintain connectivity, communications, because it is so important now for everything that we do in the aftermath of a disaster, right? So emergency communications, emergency response is important. Cybersecurity is critical. And the move towards digitization of government services as well is very important, because if we continue to deliver government services in that old, outmoded form of lines and forms and days and weeks and months waiting for approval, then we will never be able to compete on the international stage. So it's important. The CTU has an initiative called 21st Century Government. It is to drive that digitization. And there are tons of money out there. The OECS countries have moved forward. Barbados has moved forward. Other countries are moving forward. The issue of digital identity, digital payments, very important for us if we are to have an end-to-end digital experience in offering public services or even private sector services. So those are some of the key areas that we will focus on, and we will work with our stakeholders to ensure that we are, leaders really globally, and the Caribbean holds its own on the international stage.
Wonderful.
And I want to thank you all. I'm sure we're out of time, and I really want to thank you. It has been engaging. I really, like the format, and I appreciate the questions. And I look forward to doing this again with you all at some point.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you very much, Rodney, and thank you very much to all our participants. This was the first, and I think it went extraordinarily well.
Thank you.
I would just like to say, for those people who are interested in a more detailed digital transformation of Trinidad and Tobago, next week on the 10th at 7 o'clock again, our guest will be Kirk Henry, who is the CEO of iGovTT, and iGovTT is the implementation arm of the digital transformation strategy of the Trinidad and Tobago government. So it'll be more focused on that next week. So hopefully everybody who's interested in digital transformation can come along, spread the word, and we'll see you next week.
And it goes without saying, of course, to further engage with us, go to iSOCTT's Facebook presence, write to us, come out, ask your questions at any time. You will see the recording of this session and other useful tidbits on the Facebook presence, on the YouTube channel. Just search for us, iSOC Trinidad and Tobago, and everything is right there.
And we're also on the Insta and on
Right. Insta is the new trend between Insta and TikToks.
But we're not TikToking yet. We're not on TikTok.
Not yet.
We're not on TikTok yet. But we have got a social media person, thank God. So hopefully we'll be a lot more, and we will be posting the recording and snippets of the recordings and transcriptions and all the bits and pieces. So those who did not see it, you can tell your friends who didn't get to see it that they will be able to see the recording. Okay? So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Bye.
All right, take care. Bye-bye, everyone.